Hallelujah. It is Friday night, Sabbath Eve. You know, the world likes to say, thank God it's Friday. Well, it really, when you get to Friday after sunset, Friday Eve, we can say, thank God it's Sabbath. Did I get some rah-rahs on that? Yeah. No matter how burdensome your week was, and hopefully it was burdensome, because 6 days God gives us to what, brethren? Leisure, lay around, relax? No! You know the answer to this. He gives us 6 days to work. And what is work? Work is work. And we should be striving to become ye perfect, right? Some people love to say, well, I'm not perfect, and I'll never be perfect in this life. Well, you better be trying to be, because Jesus Christ told us in Matthew 5, what is it, verse 48? Become you perfect. Let me just check myself on that. I have some other scriptures to start out with tonight that I believe are important and that relate to the excerpt from a World Tomorrow telecast with God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong that we're going to cut to in just a few minutes. I'm not going to waste a lot of time yakking at, I did inspire the God when I opened my mouth tonight that he fill it. You can pray the same thing, even as we are live, brethren, and God can block my mind and put nothing else in there but what he wants me to say. If one of you have an urgent prayer and say, I really would like you to have him say this. Now, God can say no to your prayer. but I mean, if it's really urgent, and you can try it. And if you, like the gal, I think I'm most impressed with, or very impressed by a real situation that Robin Weber told me about when I was sitting down with him some 30, 40 years ago now. But I remember this as strongly and as vividly as if he had just told it to me yesterday or early this morning or late this afternoon even, or just before we came on. That a young lady had come in to see him who had a tooth problem. She was missing a tooth. Completely missing a tooth somehow. For whatever, I don't know the details on that, but she was missing a tooth. And she came in to be anointed and asked the minister to anoint her and ask God to regrow her a new tooth. Well, the minister thought he should explain to her, look, that's not something God usually does. The body's programmed to have two sets of teeth, childhood teeth and then adult teeth. And when you're a child, you have these certain teeth, and you lose one, and it regrows to grow in an adult tooth. And she said, I know that, but I believe if you anoint me and ask God to heal this situation, he can grow me a new tooth. Well, the minister said, all right, because of your request and your apparent faith, I'll anoint you, and I'll ask God to give that to you. But the minister told me, he said, Steve, I didn't believe God would do it. But, he did his job. He did, we respond to people's requests if they're reasonable. Now, if some requests become unreasonable because of circumstances, but if it's reasonable, you bend and go with it. You may explain. That's not what God normally does. And whether you say I don't believe he'll do it or not, you don't want to break another person's faith. If they believe it, that is the criteria for moving mountains. According to your belief, your real belief. She believed God would grow her a tooth. And guess what? The minister involved, I already told you his name, Robin Weber, told me, Stephen, she came back to see me 3-4 months later. And she opened up her mouth and pointed, and guess what? He said, I had seen where the tooth had been knocked out. He said, there was a brand new tooth growing there. And it was pretty much full grown when she came to see him. So, look, God can do the impossible, what to men would seem to be the impossible. But he does tell us, and it is Matthew 5, it is verse 48 of Matthew 5. Be or become you therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. We are to become perfect like him. We're to at least strive for it, work on it. And there are times, brethren, when we can say no to the temptations that the devil puts in front of us. And if we are not saying no, guess who may say no to you when it comes time to consider who is accounted worthy and who is not accounted worthy, to Revelation 12:14. Now, if you don't know what that verse says, and if you don't know why I'm flapping my hands like wings, make a note. That verse, look it up. There's a verse I do want to draw your attention to, and let's see, I always have to, I need our equipment set up a little different here, because it's awkward for me to have to punch controls up over on this side and then turn around and point to the screen over on this side, but we can do it. You have to bear with something. All right, look, on this screen we have a verse from Matthew 10:22. Thank you, David Duff, who used that verse earlier this week. Now, I've pulled that verse up in several different translations, and I've got it here. I got a button where we can pull this full screen for you. And something that we want to be mindful of. Now, as I opened the show and I said, hallelujah, it's Friday night, Sabbath Eve. Rah, rah, Sabbath. Thank God it's Sabbath. The world loves to say, thank God it's Friday, because the normal work week's Monday through Friday, and Friday, the last day of work, we get off and most people head out. And before the coronavirus, Friday night was a big party night for a lot of working people who worked in offices Monday through Friday type work. And now if you work at some retail store where they're 7 days a week and they work you any and all hours, and you never know exactly when you're going to be off, unless you're in God's church and you've made a strict arrangement with them. I don't work on the Sabbath. And sometimes you have to fight around for that, and you have to prove yourself very valuable to them the other days of the week when they will schedule you. So they say, oh yeah, this man, he doesn't work Friday night or Saturday, but he does darn good work the rest of these days. Excuse me, I used a euphemism there we probably shouldn't be using. He does outstanding work the rest of the time, and so we want him here. We want him here as much as we can, but he will not come in on Friday night or Sabbath, and we want him the rest of the time. We got to give to him, so he gives to us, so we get him, And God will help you with that. But David was pointing out this verse, and brethren, sometimes during the week you find out, not only from the world, but you find out sometimes there are other people who call themselves brethren who seem to hate you. And now sometimes there are simply misunderstandings. And some of the understanding we have to have is that there are first generation and there are second generation, and today there's even third, fourth, and fifth generation. 1 Corinthians 7, church kids. By 1 Corinthians 7, talking about the verse, I think it's 14 or 29, that talks about how kids of a parent in the church are not cut off from God the way the rest of the world's kids are, because God considers them to be sanctified. Now, what does he mean by sanctified? He means, not cut off from God the way the rest of the world is, because of that one parent, or even more blessedly, both parents called by God and is part of the church. And your mate can be affected and can have the door open to being called, as 1 Corinthians 7 intimates to us, because of the good conduct of you who are married to an unconverted mate. But if you act like the unconverted mate does, and you begin to hate them because, God didn't call them when he called you, or they didn't respond, or they didn't grow as fast as you were growing, but then maybe your growth reverted because you decided, I'm tired of this guy or this gal. It can work both ways, according to 1 Corinthians 7:14. I'm going to look ahead to verse 29. Yeah, it's actually 14, I think I want. Yep. 1 Corinthians 7, verse 14, that talks about how the kids, your children, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. So it works either way. If you are in God's church and you have a mate, maybe they grew up in the church, but they just never told God that they wanted to be part of the first resurrection yet. And so they're acting very carnal. They don't have God's Holy Spirit, and it's obvious. But if they're pleased to dwell with you, even though you're suffering it, you need to carry through on that. You need to there is a mental abuse that can be as treacherous as physical abuse, but there has to be understanding on this, of course. But here's what the Scripture, what God says in His Word. He says, the unbelieving mate is sanctified by the believing mate. It says it both ways, so I summarized it that way. Here's the point I wanted to get to about the church kids. God then says, else were your children unclean, but now are they holy. Now what does it mean they're holy? They're still kids. They haven't been baptized. They don't have God's Holy Spirit yet. How can they be holy? Well, in the usage here, it means they're not cut off from God the way the rest of the world is. Mr. Armstrong one Sabbath came out and shocked everybody a little bit when he said, well, greetings, all you holy, righteous brethren. And some people looked around like, uh-oh, has Mr. Armstrong lost a marble? Has he gone batty or nutty here on us? But he very quickly picked up and explained why he was saying that. And then everybody seemed very quickly also to understand. Yeah, God calls us precious treasure. He even called ancient Israel his treasure, his royal treasure. And they were very special to him. And of course, Jesus Christ was married to ancient Israel, even old, unconverted ancient Israel. Jesus Christ was in the position of 1 Corinthians 7, verse 14, of being a converted mate who had an unconverted mate. Now, in the case of Christ, the unconverted mate, ancient Israel, was not pleased to have Christ as her husband. Unfortunately, and Christ wound up having to divorce her. But on the kids, else were your children unclean, but now they are holy. They're not cut off from God the way the rest of the world is cut off. Now, Mr. Armstrong is going to cover something tonight that is related to this verse we have up here. And I've got several versions of this verse I want to go through with you. Because, brethren, if you find yourself hated by people in the world, or some of the translations render it unliked, but the real word translated as hated or unliked is a word that can mean detested to the point of persecution. And when the government of the beast ascends out of the bottomless pit, that detestation, that detestment they have for God and His truth to the point of persecution will be the kind of persecution that goes all the way to martyrdom. And those who are left behind to have to face that need that, because of Revelation 3:18, with Christ saying, look, if you got left behind and became part of the Laodicean era that begins when the beast ascends out of the bottomless pit. That's the way God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong explained it, brethren. That's not something I came up with on my own. I'm just preaching it as we were taught, as we're instructed to do. And as a good Berean who's checked that up in the Bible, I can tell you, you should know them yourself, the verses that support the fact that the Laodicean era, as an era, not attitude, that's been with us since even while Mr. Armstrong was alive, but as an era of what Laodicean era means, an era of martyrdom, a time of martyrdom, a 3.5-year period of intense martyrdom. And it allows a person left behind, Revelation 12:17 style, to be able to do what Christ said in Revelation 3:18, I counsel you to buy of me gold, tried in the fiery trial of martyrdom. Now, I'm probably preaching to the choir. Those tuned in here probably believe what Christ said in Luke 21:36, that we should be watching and praying without ceasing, praying without ceasing, and watching without ceasing too, so that we can be accounted worthy to stand before the Son of Man, number one in goal orientation, but number one in time order would be so that we can be accounted worthy to escape all that's going to happen, beginning with the fifth seal, opening of the Great Tribulation, and the beast ascending out of the abyss, the bottomless pit. German Chancellor Angela Merkel knew to call it the abyss, the original Greek word. And she knows what that means. She knows that that powerful government that was part of the Roman Catholic Church, united together government and church as the Holy Roman Empire, will be revived, and the revival of it will come when this dormant, sleeping, being revived, healing beast suddenly ascends for one last time out of, as German Chancellor Angela Merkel put it, the abyss. And she was quoting from, whether she knew it or not, she was quoting from Revelation chapter 17 and verse 8, that speaks of the beast that was and is not and yet is. Now, what does all that crazy consortment of language and verbs mean? Well, it means that the Holy Roman Empire was active from, let's pick a date where after the three little horns were plucked up by the Pope because they didn't get along. Worse than that, the Vandals and the rest of them tried to do away with the Pope and his authority. But he was able to pluck them up by the roots, totally getting rid of those first three little horns of the 10 horns of that beast from the ocean. Well, let's take a look at that for a second. If we come out to the studio, I don't want to take away from Mr. Armstrong's time, but I did ask God to inspire when I open my mouth, brethren, and I hope by getting you spiritually tuned up, mentally thinking in the Spirit. I'm going to ask you some questions. Do you know what date today is on the Hebrew calendar? Let's pop that up here for a second, and then we're going to go to the wall with that beast from the ocean and pick back up where I just left off. Here in the lower third, you can see that tonight's date is on the Roman calendar over here on this side, right under me, it's the 23rd day of October, 2020. 23rd day, October 2020. All right, here on this other side, let's get a better shot over here. Let's see. Over here on this other, well, it's way down there now, but over on this side, on the bottom of the lower third, or toward the middle, you can see Saturday, Sabbath Eve. And we explained on this side, it's Friday night, where we're referencing the Roman calendar version of calendar reference. But here on the Hebrew calendar, on this side, now my monitor's over here, so even though I got a point over here, I got to look at a monitor over here. I could look at one over here. All right, let's see. All right, so down here, way down there below my desk, in the lower third, toward the left side, very bottom line, it explains today's Hebrew calendar date, God's holy sacred calendar, the Hebrew calendar. It's the 6th day of the 8th month. Now some of you may be saying, wait a minute, Stephen, I'm looking at the calendar and it says it's the 5th day of the 8th month, you know. Well, it was the 5th day until sunset. So if the sun has set where you are, as it has where I am, you know, God changes the day at sunset, not like men at midnight. So even though the day stays the 23rd of October until midnight on the Roman calendar, it's already the 6th day of the 8th month on God's holy sacred calendar. Now we're totally outside the 7th month that has 4 holy days in that one month, on the 1st, the 10th, the 15th through the 21st, and then on the 22nd. When I say 15th through the 21st, those are feast days. Only the first day, the 15th of the 7th month, is a holy day. So holy days, you got the 1st, 10th, 15th, and then the 22nd of the 7th month. All 4 fall holy days. 4 holy days in the fall season in one month, the month of Tishri, the month of the 7th month. Whether I said that correct in its Hebrew designation or not, it's the 7th month. We now are at the 6th day, as of sunset tonight, of the 8th month. Now we've got a nice, long fall and winter to go through before we hit the next holy day season in the spring. We got all the rest of this 8th month and all of the 9th month, the 10th month, the 11th month, the 12th month. Is this a extended year? I'll have to look. But then before we get to the first month, we've got at least 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least 5 months, maybe 6. If this is a quote-unquote leap year, they don't have leap years on the Hebrew calendar. They have extended years. But I'll check to see if this is one of those. They come in 3, 6, skip 7, 9th, 11th. You know, in every 19-year time cycle, there's 7 extended years where there's a 13th month. The 12th month becomes also the Adar, becomes Adar 2 for a 13th month in those extended years. But we got a long haul, 5 or 6 months now until the next holy day. And until the next feast, because the next feast is Passover, which is not a holy day, but it's the most solemn feast day of the entire year. Okay, I just want to make sure we have our thinking spiritual and straight, that we become perfect in our thinking. You know, because we're going to be teachers. We need to know and understand these things that we need to be teaching. All right, now, what I wanted to do was come out to the full shot so that we could easily go over to this calendar, the screen on the far side, on my far right side, your left side, the screen of that crazy-looking Revelation 13 beast from the ocean, which contains 4 bodies but 7 heads. The third body has 4 heads on it, so by the time you've counted through the heads of the first 3 bodies, that's 6 heads, and now the 4th body is the 7th head with 10 horns on it. That's what I wanted to focus on, and if we bring that screen out full, gets the lower third out of the way. Actually, that doesn't hurt to stay there for this shot. You'll see the heads down below between the 2 front paws. You got the head of the lion. We're talking Daniel 7 language now, and also Revelation 13, beast of the ocean. That head of the lion in Daniel 7 is the same as the head of gold on the statue. Now, if we come back for a moment, we've got a statue up above me here that's from Daniel chapter 2. And on the top of that statue, the head of gold is the same as this head of the lion on this beast from the ocean. That's picturing the Chaldean Empire and Nebuchadnezzar. Then the second body, the second head, I should say second head, as we move to the right, is that bear, and that's the same as the shoulders and breast of silver on the Daniel 2 statue. Second world ruling empire, that would be the Alexander the Great's the third. So the Medes and Persians is the second. And then those four heads, those four leopard heads you see in between, down below and in between the lion and the bear, that's your third world ruling empire, which is the same as the belly and thighs of brass on the Daniel 2 statue up above me. Then we come to the seventh head on that body, that with the seventh head, dreadful head with iron teeth that has 10 horns on it, and the three little horns right on the tip of the nose above the teeth there, those are the three that the Pope plucked up, and it left 7 horns remaining, and those 7 remaining horns are the same. They represent the governments that are named in Revelation 17 verse 10 that says to us there are 7 kings. Those 7 kings are the same as those last 7 remaining horns on that beast from the ocean. And they are, the rest of that verse in Revelation 17 says there are 7 kings, and they are those 7 horns. It says 5 are fallen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those last 7 are Justinian through Napoleon. The 6th, Revelation 17:10 refers to the 6th as one is. Now that one is only from 1935 to 1945. Now let me back up a little bit. Verse 8 of Revelation 17 says the beast that was. Okay. So you can remember what that means. It means the beast was active during a certain portion of time, from 554 AD to 1814 AD, 1260 years, continuously active. Then that beast went into the abyss, and so he was not, or is not. But the is not permanent. The is not is only dormancy, sleeping, being healed and revived, so that the beast that was and is not and yet is and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit did that in the former type with Mussolini, who was the one is from 1935 to 1945. So you had the beast that was from 554 to 1814, then is not, was sleeping, dormant in the abyss, in the bottomless pit, the abyss. From 554 to 1814. So from 1814 until 1935, that beast was in the abyss. So he is not, or was not from 1814 to 1935, and yet is. Because from 1935 to 1945, he ascended out of the abyss in the form of Mussolini, thanks to Garibaldi unifying Italy, and then Hitler operating under Mussolini, doing terror. Of course, Mussolini did some of his own terror. And then this beast went back into the abyss in 1945. So he was from 554 to 1814, then he is not between then and 1935, when he was again active from 1935 to 1945. As he ascended in the former type. Now he is not. Since 1945, that beast is not. But he's not permanently is not, because one final time, the duality of prophecy and the more greater fulfillment, that beast will ascend out of that bottomless pit, the abyss, one last time in the form of the 7th king that's referenced in verse 10 of Revelation 17 as the other is not yet come. The other not yet come. It says there are 7 kings, 5 fallen, 1 is fallen. Now the other is not yet come. That's your 7th king. And let me check myself on that exact verbiage. So if you got your King James open and you're looking at it and you say, oh, you didn't quote that exactly right, Stephen. Okay, well, we'll just make sure from the Bible itself that we got that like it should say it. Verse 10, Revelation 17, verse 10, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space, 3.5 years, or some portion of that. And we're watching for that 7th king that'll ascend out of that bottomless pit, out of that abyss, and then the beast that will be, was again, active. Was active, is active when it ascends until Christ returns. From the time it ascends and opens the fifth seal, a 3.5-year clock begins until Christ returns on the seventh trump of the seventh seal. All right, that's an overview. And having mentioned that, I needed to explain what we were talking about. And I hope, brethren, that you are in tune with this enough that by my making a small reference to these things and a quick summary of them, your mind is refreshed and you say, yes, Stephen, I've heard you say all this and explain the details of this enough that Mr. Armstrong would be pleased that you did what he told the ministry to do, to be sure and give, brethren, the details that I don't have time to give them, he said. And some of the details I give you, you won't find in the book of Revelation unveiled at last, except in a summary form. I've dug those details out a little more deeply for you, and I hope some of you are staying in tune with me enough to get that fact. And if you do get it, give God thanks. And if you want to give me a little encouragement once in a while and prayer, I'll appreciate it, because guess who, like a roaring lion, is coming after your television minister here, Stephen Gilbreath. It's like that. It's that Satan, the devil. He's been after me for a good year in a ferocious, fiery trial kind of a way. But thankfully, I can say it tonight, but now this week I may have to face that varmint again. But, you know, brethren, the same way you do. As we are scattered especially, we need to be careful and hang tight with brethren who you can be friends with without that friendship becoming butthead. You know, if you're arguing with a fellow brother, you need to take some space and check yourself. I'm glad that, you know, one of you encouraged me to fast this week when you said you were going to be fasting. Somebody I've been butting heads with. I said, okay, God, I'm still carnal enough, brethren, and that if one of you've got something maybe on me in a way that you think I'm wrong, and you say, I'm going to fast about this. Well, it may just inspire me to fast too, but I think maybe I outdid you. You said you were going to fast one day. I fasted 2 days. I shouldn't be boasting on that, but thankfully I just ended the fast at sunset today, so whoosh, I'm glad that's over. And I feel stronger by having weakened myself and pitched to God to, you know, look, help me against this roaring lion. He's coming at me in all kind of forms. And some of you crying at me and what have you, yeah, you can get to me that way, but and you wonder, why has Stephen put up a fence around me? Well, because I'm human, I have some vulnerabilities, and sometimes we have to protect those until we can reach out to God and say, God, you got to strengthen me, you know, and help me be able to deal with this. We're all in this as a race, and we're going to go through these verses that are going to point out, and Mr. Armstrong's going to help us see that too when we get to his excerpt in a moment, that we're not saved until this ball game is over. And the way God puts it through Christ speaking, recorded by Luke in chapter 21, verse 36, salvation, many of you know this already, eternal life is a gift, but you can disqualify from receiving that gift. And because it's law and grace, we need God's mercy. I hope this is encouraging to you, brethren, because some of you I know, especially as we go through confinement of this virus, we've had to lock ourselves in sometimes, wear these dumb masks. And it's a good idea to obey the government. When you go out, put them on, even if you hate them. Now, they do allow you in Alabama, if you have difficulty breathing, you can take it off. So they allow you that if you have this medical problem. I can't breathe through this thing. You know, take it off. But, of course, the store you're in may say once you take it off, yeah, but go outside. Because they have a right to enforce, you know, in their private store. If they don't want people in there not wearing masks, they can tell you to go outside. And then if you don't, they can have you arrested for trespassing. And then you sue them because the medical thing said I didn't have to wear them, I'm having difficulty breathing. And then they'll come back and say, yeah, well, okay, take the mask off, go outside, breathe. But don't come in our store breathing without it. So, look, we got to obey the authorities over us. Don't be an unusual burden on people, and don't frustrate, trouble people, unreasonably. But all right, I got to get to Mr. Armstrong. I want to get to Mr. Armstrong now. We signed on late tonight. I was up late last night watching the president, streaming him live. If you didn't see him, I've got the live stream on the Sabbath service page and also on the World Watch TV page of Facebook Live, and I have it on the YouTube live video page for the World Watch channel. It's not on the Sabbath service channel on YouTube Live, but it's on the World Watch TV page of YouTube Live, archived there. I didn't make a reference to it on our cogtv.org archive video site because it's just something. It's like, well, maybe I should have, but it's just something you watch while things are current and kind of get a feel so you know how to pray. And it's God who will pick the outcome of that. And we don't know how it's hard to predict how that's going to go now. And a lot of it will be affected, brethren. You can actually have more effect on who is the next president than many of the voters out there. Now, why would Stephen Gilbreath sit here and say that to you? And that is because it's God who decides who is our leader. And your prayers have a great deal of influence upon God. So, I think we've had something we can be thankful for, more or less, in the last 3.5 years in the way of government in the United States. Now look, we're to become perfect, Matthew 5:48. Many of you can see and know that no human man, especially one without God's Spirit yet, is perfect. That's all I'm going to say about that. Let's go with these verses. Let me put these full on the screen, and we're going to punch through a few of these and then get to Mr. Armstrong. All right, bring this full forward again, and I'll get the lower third out of the way. And this is something I know we've experienced. You shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved. Now, brethren, I'm emphasizing that, kind of punching that out. Let me get over here a little closer with you. Just keep the screen where you can read it over there. I'm punching that part of the verse out that says, shall be saved, because the Protestant world and the religious world has the idea that once you give your heart to the Lord, why, you're saved. Well, read this verse. This verse, and you're going to see it plainly on some different versions of the Bible, different translations of the Bible. I'm going to pop up of this same verse in a moment. It talks about, let's pull this, see if I can pull this forward again, this shot here. It talks about at the bottom here, if you endure to the end, you shall be saved. Shall be, that's future tense, saved. All right, let's see it in a few other verses. Versions, a few other versions of the Bible. Here's from the Amplified Bible. And you'll be hated by everyone. All right, now that's, that kind of puts a different twist on it, but it's saying the same thing. You shall be hated of all men. This verse says by everybody, by everyone. If we had a French version up here, I think it would say tout le monde. I got to get that French version. The French language is sometimes really cool. There's a lot of French expressions we use in the English language. That was one of them when I said expression. Like Debar Apartian came into our French class at Ambassador College. He was the overall director of the French work, and he was the overall director of the French class. In fact, he was listed as the instructor of the French class, even though we had another man in there with us daily going through our French lessons. And Mr. Debar Apartian, because of his responsibilities, would only come in every so often. But on the first day of the class, he came in and said, "Students, whether you've had French in high school or not, he says, I am going to teach you 500 French words today, and their pronunciation and their meaning. Their meaning and their pronunciation. You're going to walk out of here thoroughly understanding, knowing and understanding 500 French words. And he says, perhaps you didn't know these were French words, but he says, every word in English that ends in S-I-O-N or T-I-O-N is a French word and has the exact same meaning in English as it does in French. He says only when you're speaking it, you just pronounce it. Pronunciation, a little different. But it's the same word, same meaning, same understanding. So expression in French, same, means the same thing. But everybody, you'll be hated by everybody. Let's look at a few other translations, versions of the Bible with this. But let's read the rest of this first. You'll be hated by everyone because of, and I like the way they bracket this explanation, because of your association with my name, the name of God and of Jesus Christ. But it is the one who has patiently preserved and endured to the end, who will be saved. Not presently already are saved because you gave your heart to the Lord. No, you will be saved if you patiently persevere and endure all the way to the end. And that means endure temptation the devil throws at you. That means endure hatred that the world will throw at you, because like this verse clearly says, you'll be hated by everyone. And that may include some who call themselves brethren, throwing all kind of hatred at you. Now, some do that to me. I never call names. I know I step on toes because I call actions, and I explain the truth as God gave it to us through his servant, Mr. Herbert Armstrong, and as it's applicable through the proving of the scriptures that back up the truths God gave us through Mr. Armstrong, and those ministers who were faithful to God and the true teachings through Mr. Armstrong that God gave us, including Robert Collins, whom God told when he was in the hospital with cancer, and this is probably why God let him have cancer and get into the hospital. He said, while I was in that hospital, Stephen, God told me that when I get out of here, I need to go take the name that I created, the vanity plate name, as Mr. Collins put it, off the little church group I started with the blankety-blank Church of God church group. I'm supposed to go tell them we got to take the name off the group, that I can still meet with them and minister to them, give sermons for them, but we got to do away with the vanity plate name. And does that not apply to the hundreds of other ministers who have, call it vanity plate or put a banana peeling with the words Church of God? Banana peeling meaning the part of the expression by grammar people that say the adjective is the banana peeling of the parts of speech. It modifies, it wraps, and what it does in this case, it wraps a small group of people, the little banana inside the peeling, that this minister has been able to attract, whether he was your old local pastor or somebody on the internet that's just been able to attract people to him, And then he shows himself to be compromising. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if, in almost every case where men have put a banana peeling, a vanity plate with Church of God and created a vanity plate business name, blankety-blank Church of God group, and encourages people to consider themselves to be a member of that group. And that does one of the things God explained to Mr. Collins, it would prevent people from understanding that we are scattered. Because you think of your little group, hey, God's church is over here in my little XYZ group, or my ABC or DEF or GHI or JKLNOP group. You know, whatever name, vanity plate, banana peeling, the minister who created that group has applied to it. Now, when I say I don't attack any individual people, I'm not mentioning any names. One name I mentioned earlier, I mentioned in a positive way to share with you a healing that miraculously happened, and the minister shared that with me, and I'm now sharing that with you, hopefully encouraging your faith in healing. But I don't attack any ministers by name, at least I'm not at this point. God may change that later on. At this point, those ministers who've done these things, created vanity plate groups, have time to do what Mr. Collins did. Undo it. Take the name off. Tell the brethren, I'll still serve you with sermons. Now, some people may not want you to after you take the name they worship away from them. We don't have this name where we can consider that the Church of God just continued on after Mr. Armstrong died. We're here through my little group, our big group in some cases. I'm devastated. Well, maybe you should have been devastated a long time ago, to have been on your knees more fervently about the fact that God has allowed us to be scattered, which is both a punishment and a test. What'd you say, Stephen? 1, 2, it's a punishment and it's a test. Well, I didn't know we were being punished. I didn't know we were being tested. Well, you better wake up. Mr. Armstrong used to pound on the lectern, as he would say, brethren, wake up! Some of you aren't getting it. And because of these banana peeling vanity plate groups, some of you aren't getting it. And you're lamb-blasting me personally, mentioning my name as if I was a scallywag, a wag, when I'm telling you the truth. And yes, I know I step on a few toes, but I'm not calling out anybody by name. Some of you are taking too much personal offense, as if you say, I'm attacking you. I haven't mentioned your name. But if the shoe fits, you may have to wear it. And if it's a shoe off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there's some good on that tree, but it's mixed with evil. And in almost every case, these vanity plate, banana peeling Church of God groups, the ministry have compromised the truth God gave us through his end-time apostle. All right? Now, if you get it, great. And if you're willing to stay with me with that understanding, great. If not, toodaloo. I'm not going to be pulled down with you as you sink. You know, some of you need to get those excess burdens out of your life. Day of Unleavened Bread pictures putting out sin, and compromise is a sin. Hiding the truth and perverting the truth, compromising the truth is a sin. It causes people to stumble, and the consequences of causing people to stumble, oh man, what does God say? You'd be better off to have a weight tied around your neck, chain tied around your neck and attached to a weight, and you're thrown in the ocean. I'm paraphrasing that, but that's basically what God says. You'd be better off if that happened to you than you causing people to stumble. And when you come up and have to answer for that, whoa, man, I do not want to be in your shoes. If I cause some people to dislike me or even hate me now because they refuse to correct themselves when they hear the truth. I don't want to hear this truth. I like my little banana peeling vanity plate group. And on you who tell me the truth that these things, this needs to be changed. It needs to be changed, brethren. All right, in the meantime, now as God has caused many people to have to stay home, maybe some of you will stumble upon our live stream here, and God through this will give you what you need to understand about the fact that we are presently scattered. We're going to be those who do what Christ said do in Luke 21:36, who watch. Watch what? Well, where did he say this? In Luke 21, what was he doing? He was explaining the seals of Revelation in plain language. And at the point where he said, watch, he was in between the first 4 active seals and, as God's end-time apostle put it, the next major event in prophecy, the 5th seal opening up with the Great Tribulation. That's the point where Christ was saying, watch. Well, there's only 4 to watch, the 4 that are active. They're called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in one way. There's 4 colored horses, the white horse of false religion, the red horse of war and rumors of war and the uniting of Europe and world war, the black horse of famine, scarcity of food, and the 4th horse, the pale horse of death, primarily by disease epidemic, loimus, but also by seismic activity on the earth, commotions in the air, commotions on the ground, gale force winds of all kinds, and volcanic eruptions, tornadoes, etc., and commotions on the ground, earthquakes, tsunamis, tidal waves, fires, floods, and even the volcanic eruptions. They begin deep in the ground and spew ashes up into the air, and lava, and molten lava. All that seismic activity, that's part of the death, and death by wild animals. All that's part of the 4th seal. We should be watching and praying for people affected by these things. And these kind of stories are just one after another. They're 90-something% of our daily news. Some of them have more impact and are more significant and are more the things we should be watching than others. And God willing, I'll appreciate your prayers, and those of you that have been encouraging me in several ways. Your encouragements have been extremely meaningful because things are moving forward. New doors are opening. So while we've been off, I've got doors to Reuters opening up. I've got to negotiate their pricing. It's a little bit on the choke you side. But I've got other doors for news stories opening up. The BBC we're talking. They've changed their ground rules for me, and on the licensing, and that's made life difficult. So while things happened, God allowed things to happen and make a number of things be straightened around. It also has started. He also has started to open up some new doors where we'll have some dynamic news resources. In fact, including some of our own reporters coming to me and saying, Stephen, if you'd like me to appear on your program and give you a live report from the Middle East, from Israel, Emily Rose, thank you, I'll do it for you. Well, thank you. That could develop into public radio, other things too, that, you know, the reporters offering to do that could make some money from, and it could work, and they'll be part of our team, not part of some of these others that we have to license from and pay money to be able to show their stuff. Although that's good. There's value in that because they have hundreds of reporters all over the world, and a way to keep our nose on and eyes on what's going on. Keep a good finger on it. And then I've had one from Asia, one in Hong Kong, say, you know, what do you do? Can I help you? I say, yeah, I think you can. Give us reports on how, you know, what China's doing to y'all over there in Hong Kong. So, and a few more doors like that may open. I'll be appreciative, brethren, of your prayers that God open those doors up to Steve, help him negotiate them properly and get everything working and get back on and get his house in order. I did some things this week to help legally with the financial structuring that I have to assemble because of what happened with things to repair. And at this juncture, even though selling this and moving into something smaller over into the 3 acres I donated to church ministry work is a possibility. At this moment, it's also like I'm saying, God, I'm seeing that for the time being, you seem to be working things where I can stay here, put things back in order after the break-in, and after the, not only a break-in, but when our network, I had failed to keep some security things up on it. I have to do everything. I'd love to have some help here who understands how to work with some of these things. I had one man, but he moved and a long way from here, and he's helping an elderly man. So I'm thankful he's doing that kind of good. But I would love someday to see him or somebody like him back here. Or you couple guys up in New York, you know, a lot of stuff you could learn that would help this ministry work if you really want to get into it. Especially if I'm encouraging these guys to learn how to lead songs. We'll have some hymns tomorrow, and instead of just putting the scrolling lyrics up on the screen, you'll see me leading the songs now, and I'm asking the fellows that I want to learn how to do this to watch as I do it, and I've given them some instruction on how to do it, and I hope they're practicing with us. And you know, and I've found it, some of you have commented to me, hey, Steve, I like it. It's more like we're interacting better. Yeah, we can still see the words on the screen real well, and we interact better when you wave your hands at us during the songs. All right, so we have some Sabbath fun here, brethren. I jump on people, I step on toes. And those of you, some of you are with me. So I'm preaching, as I preach to the choir, some of you are saying, rah, rah, I'm with you, Steve. You know, I'm stepping on our toes, we're with you. And that's great. That's good. I still throw the challenge out there to the guys who claim they're the end-time two witnesses to change this bottle of water I have. What did I do with that bottle of water? I saw it just a little while ago. It hasn't changed the blood yet. In fact, I took a sip of water off of one of them. And I've thrown the challenge out there. Okay, if you two guys who claim to be the two witnesses really are, and if you are, why don't you realize, like Mr. Armstrong told us, God's end-time apostle told us, the fifth seal would open up when these guys appear. They do their work for the same 3.5 years. That is the same duration as the Great Tribulation, as the opening of the fifth seal until the seventh seal, seventh trump. Same 3.5 years, 1,260 days, 42 months. A times and half a time. All that's the same 3.5 year period. And during that 3.5 year period, Revelation 11, beginning in about verse 3 and 4 and 5, tell us that those who receive the designation from God as his two olive branches, who become the two witnesses, the two candlesticks, they will be, and they're not, you know, they don't even know they should also be saying they're the two candlesticks. Duh. Now, you people that are trying to promote this idea, look, the two witnesses are here. Well, the Revelation, the Great Tribulation is not here yet. So no, they're not. And when they're here, they will have not only the title, but they'll have these powers. Listen, or look at it with me. Revelation 11. Let's see, I'm in 12. Where's 11? 11's right before 12. So let's be sure I'm in 11 and verse 3 and 4. Verse 4, these are the two olive branches. Verse 3 says, I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These, verse 4, are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And verse 5, if any man will hurt them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies, and if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. These, verse 6, pay careful attention to this verse. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them into blood. So, that's the challenge I've thrown out. You people that are saying these guys are the two witnesses, and you know them personally, give them the challenge I've given you to give them. Tell them to take this bottle of water. I don't have it. I can grab it now, but I'll get it. I'll put it behind me tomorrow morning during Sabbath service. Not tomorrow morning, but in the morning. It's already Sabbath, so it's not tomorrow. It'll be just simply in the morning on the Sabbath. During the Sabbath service in the morning, I'll have that bottle, big gallon jug of water in here with me. And you guys tell these two witness people that are these two half-wits that are claiming to be God's two end-time witnesses, tell them, Stephen Gilbreath has thrown a challenge to you on his little TV stream thing to show the powers that God says if you are his two witnesses you will have in verse 6 of Revelation 11 to be able to change water into blood. He's got a little gallon container of water, not the whole river, not the whole lake. He's not asking you to do anything fantastic. Just change a little bottle, a little gallon-sized bottle of water he has in the room with him. Change it to blood. Now you guys could embarrass the living daylights out of me as I hold up that gallon jug of pure, clear water. If these two guys were the real two witnesses, and then while I'm holding that jug, the clear water turns into red blood. Now, no way am I going to do a joke or a trick like that. I mean, I'm not, I wouldn't even joke with that, other than I'll hold up the clear bottle of water. I wouldn't even, Mr. Collins used to love to trick people on the Day of Atonement. He would say, excuse me, brother, just for a second, they just grab a sip of water. And he went through it like he was going to do it, to put everybody in shock. I said, I'm just kidding you, brother. Now, that kind of joke is kind of cool. Brethren will tell you, hey, I'll treat lunch today. They tell you that on Day of Atonement. They'll pay for the lunch. Knowing nobody's going to eat, of course. But anyway, I definitely wouldn't consider it good humor at all, a joke about that. But the prophet had a lot of fun. Who was it, Elijah? With the false prophets of Baal, as he said, put the wood on the thing and poured water over it and said, okay, you guys bring down fire from heaven if your God's a God. And they couldn't do it, but then the real God did it through Elijah. So I'm just throwing a little challenge at these guys. You change this gallon of water into blood, then you prove you're the two witnesses. They will not be able to do it. The fifth seal hasn't opened up yet. And you don't appoint yourself to those kind of positions or jobs. God decides who that's going to be, and it might even be HWA, and possibly some say, well, it also could be his forgiven son GTA. At least I definitely go along with it could be HWA, and I'm not going to tie God's hands in any way. We don't know who that is yet until God tells us. And he'll show powers through whomever that is, that are powers that are expressly mentioned in Revelation 11, which includes turning water into blood. So that's my challenge for those two half-wits out there. All right, now, where are we in time? We have just enough time to play Mr. Armstrong. And we do have time. I can go through a few other versions of these scriptures. You'll be hated by everyone, this Amplified Version says. The BBE, I forget what that stands for. It's another translation. It says, and you will be hated by all men because of my name. And of course, that means his truth and everything. But he who is strong to the end will have future salvation. The New Revised Standard Version, words Matthew 10:22, and you will be hated by all because of my name. But the one who endures to the end will be future saved. Matthew 10:22, for the National, I think this is the American Standard Bible. You'll be hated by all because of my name, but it is the one who has endured to the end who will be saved, if you endure to the end. The New King James Version puts it, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake, for my name's sake. And, and that also means because of my name, as you'll see in a few other versions. But he who endures to the end will be saved, future. And the Net Bible, and you will be hated by everyone because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be, future tense, saved. The TLB, I forget what that stands for, a version of the Bible, everyone shall hate you because you belong to me. But all of you who endure to the end shall be, future, saved. The YLT, let's see, some Other version says, and you shall be hated by all because of my name, but he who hath endured, that's speaking of a future perfect tense by the time you get to that point in time, who has endured to the end, shall be future saved. The Web Bible says, you'll be hated by all men for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end will be future saved. The New International Version, I hate to use this version too much, but this one does word this one all right. You'll be hated by everyone. I say hate to use that, brethren, because as Mr. Armstrong explained to us, a lot of these modern versions, they twist and distort and pervert things and cause misunderstanding. For public use, King James is still best to go with. Both the Revised Standard Version and the American Standard Version were versions of the Bible that Mr. Armstrong said are more accurate, and he said, beware these modern versions. So I just throw that out to you, but this wording is very similar to other versions. You'll be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end, stands firm, endures to the end. That's okay. That just adds, as long as we're using all of the versions, this just adds a little something to it. Who stands firm to the end, future will be saved. The English Standard Version says, and you'll be hated by all for my name's sake. That's very similar to the King James, but the one who endures to the end will be future saved. The English Revised Version, everyone will hate you. Everyone will hate you because you follow me, because you follow me. Yeah, that's what we should be doing, walking in Christ's steps. But the one who remains faithful to the end, the one who remains faithful to the end, will be future saved. The EE version, I forget what that stands for, but it says, many people will not like you. Well, that's a little soft language. That's like Facebook. They like or don't like what you said. Many people will not like you. The language is not strong enough here. They'll hate you. They'll detest you to the point of persecution is what the Strong's definition defines that word used for hate there. Many people will not like you, this version says, because you believe in me, but you should never stop believing in me. Then, at least they got this part in the right flavor of it. God will save you. But the angels believe and tremble, but they still disobey. You got to endure to the end with obedience along with that. Then the GNT version, everyone will hate you because of me, but whoever holds out to the end, grab a rope and hang around, one old radio announcer used to say on his program, hey, who holds out to the end, grab a rope and hang around to the end, shall be, future tense, saved. You got to endure to the end. You got to be doing things. We got to be doers of the word, not hearers only. You don't just hold out, but that still helps you think about what's being said. All right, for those of you from the Philippines, here's the Philippine version of it. I'm not even going to attempt in any way at all to, what was that, Tagalog or however they say that. I'm not even going to attempt in any way at all to read that to you, but there it is if you're from the Philippines. I got some friends that have visited the Philippines. They know this language. But let's go to the next. Go back to the King James here. And you shall be hated. You'll be detested to the point of persecution by all men, hated of all men for my name's sake. But he that endures to the end, endureth to the end, shall be future saved. All right, and then I've got the first verse that Mr. Armstrong is going to be using when he opens up in his program. So I'm going to back that up for the moment. We're going to come back to a screen. We've got to get over to Mr. Armstrong. So let's go back over here, bring Mr. Armstrong up there. And, God's kept his publications and his speaking, recordings of his speaking and all kind of occasions alive for us, thankfully. And we're going to go to one of them now. We're going to go to, he'll be speaking from a telecast in 1979 where Art Gilmore has sat down with him. We're going back to where we were just before the feast. We were in the middle of several telecasts showing what happened when the state of California attempted to break in and take over the church. We've got one more of those to go. We'll play that tonight. And in it, Mr. Armstrong reveals some very interesting things. He reveals some things that relate to the last holy day, the last great day. There's something Mr. Armstrong said in the last great day sermon excerpt. I'm going to ask you a question about it. He's going to bring up some points. I may stop it and say, here it is, during the program, so you know, oh, okay, Steve, got you. Related to Adam and Eve. And he answered the question in full. He didn't do it here. He just touched on it. He gave some details. He had Art Gilmore across from him asking the question about, what about Adam and Eve? And that's a question I'm sure a lot of people would know and have asked before, and I'm planning on sending a question over to Tom Williams, who worked for more than 20 years in letter answering at headquarters. And Hernan Herrera worked there as well. Maybe I'll include Hernan in the question to Tom. Did you guys ever get a question from people who write in, whether brethren or co-workers or viewers of the program, asking, will Adam come up in the second resurrection? You know, last great day we were looking at all the billions that'll be coming up from their graves. I went to the cemetery, introduced Mr. Armstrong speaking from a last great day sermon. I think that was 1978 or 79 he was speaking. And I introduced him from the cemetery where I was standing near graves saying, look, billions of people all around the world will be popping out of graves like these by the billions. And here's Mr. Armstrong with more detail on that. Then we focused over to Mr. Armstrong speaking from, where was he? From the last great day, either in Florida or Arizona, one or the other, I forget at the moment. But in that particular sermon excerpt, Mr. Armstrong explained whether Adam would be coming up in the second resurrection or not. He makes some comments relative to that as he answers Art Gilmore's question about 23 minutes into this telecast I'm about to play. Mr. Armstrong answers the question Art Gilmore brings up about what about Adam and Eve? And he adds a few details he didn't cover in the sermon excerpt from the last great day Sabbath. But the full answer he doesn't give in this telecast. He gives that in the last great day sermon. But he gives us some details here. I'm going to maybe stop, or at least at the end, I'll refocus your mind on that. Let's go to Mr. Armstrong, God's End-Time Apostle, speaking from 1979. And let's see, let's get that ready to go. Oh boy, do I have the right size screenshots for this. Somewhere, we just changed all that. We'll find out in a second. Let's go. All right, little flowers for some of you. Happy Sabbath. And let's see if this screen will give us what we want. Here's God's End-Time Apostle speaking from 1979.
The Ambassador College campus in Pasadena, California, has been headquarters of the Worldwide Church of God for 32 years. During that time, it has grown from one building on a 3/4-acre lot into a complex that is universally regarded as one of the most beautiful campuses in the world. Here, on January 3rd, began one of the most dramatic confrontations between church and state in 200 years of American legal history.
Brethren, I know many of the programs start out with the same introduction, but this tonight is a different program. So don't say, I've seen this before. You probably have not. This is a different, unless you saw it originally or found it on YouTube, this is a different one than the one we have showing before the feast. This is a later date in 1979. So there's some good stuff in this. Please don't tune out. Stay with God's End-Time Apostle here on this.
Morning, with no prior notice given to church officials, a California Deputy Attorney General accompanied by two private attorneys whom he had deputized, arrived at the church's Hall of Administration. They announced to startled employees that, by order of a Los Angeles Superior Court, the church had been placed in a state of receivership. With them was a retired Los Angeles judge, the designated receiver, who, employees were told, was, by court mandate, now in charge of the Worldwide Church of God.
As a result of the recent confrontation between the state of California and the Worldwide Church of God, some have accused your church members of violating state laws and disregarding the state's authority. Now, are those charges true?
Absolutely not, Art. We had broken no law whatsoever. We were not accused of breaking a specific law of any kind. Rather, in a secret session, which was in itself illegal, in the private chambers of Judge Pacht, they hatched out a conspiracy to invade and to take over the property of the Worldwide Church of God. We weren't accused. We had committed no crime. We had broken no law. They didn't come with a definite accusation of law. They didn't come to put us under arrest under an accusation, anything of the kind. They came to take over, pure and simple, and to do just what they accused us of doing, to sell the properties of the Worldwide Church of God and put the proceeds in their own pockets. It was that kind. It's hard to believe, I know, that men in politics or those in the legal profession would stoop to do a thing like that, but it has been done, and it's time that it's opened up for the public to understand.
The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents The World Tomorrow with Herbert W. Armstrong.
This is from a telecast, so we're going to let this intro play through here.
Ladies and gentlemen, Herbert W. Armstrong. Placing any corporation, let alone a church, in receivership is a drastic legal remedy. It amounts in essence to a governmental takeover. It is usually reserved for situations where some interested parties, such as stockholders, are in grave danger of loss due to gross mismanagement. The Worldwide Church of God was placed into receivership following a secret court hearing, a hearing of which church officials knew nothing. At the hearing, a deputy California Attorney General presented a lawsuit alleging that the church was indeed so mismanaged as to be worthy of receivership. It should be pointed out that while the California Attorney General was the plaintiff in this action, there were also 6 relators. These 6 individuals were former church members. Their complaints against the church supposedly formed the basis for the suit. Named as defendants in the suit were several corporations, including the Worldwide Church of God, Ambassador College, which is operated by the church, and the Ambassador International Cultural Foundation, which is funded by the church. Also named as defendants were certain individuals, principally church founder Herbert W. Armstrong and his chief advisor and aide, Stanley R. Rader. What has been most upsetting to church officials and to church members is the plaintiff's assertion that control of the church and its assets ultimately rests with the California Attorney General of California courts. According to the lawsuit, it is the responsibility of the California Attorney General to watch over non-profit corporations, including churches, and ensure that they do not misuse the funds entrusted to them. In the words of the lawsuit, the powers of any charitable trustee are subject at all times to supervision by the Attorney General, acting on behalf of the people of the state and by the court. Church leaders, such as Herbert Armstrong and Stanley Rader, were described simply as trustees who have been allowed to manage the charitable fund on a day-to-day basis. Those trustees, it was maintained, serve at the court's pleasure. Thus, the plaintiff maintained, the court, in imposing a receivership, would not be taking over private property rights. It would merely be actively exercising the rights it itself held in reserve. In the eyes of thousands of church members, this was an assertion that the courts and the state attorney general were ultimately in charge of the worldwide Church of God, having the power to remove its leadership and having control over its assets. I'm Art Gilmore. Recently, I went to Mr. Armstrong's office in Tucson to interview the man who founded the worldwide Church of God nearly 50 years ago.
Mr. Armstrong, it's nice to be back with you again. I asked you quite a few questions before, and I have some more.
Thank you, Art. Glad to have you with me again. Thank you.
Well, now, did you or any of your close personal advisors, such as Stanley Rader, violate any of the laws as a result of your resistance to this state authority?
I don't know of any law that I ever violated, and nor was I accused of any, nor was Mr. Rader. Now, they talked about siphoning off or pilfering millions of dollars to our own use. You know where that came from? That's an interesting thing. We have been taking a number of depositions as part of this lawsuit action, and we have found out a few things. We have taken depositions of the ex-members that had been put out of the church, who were embittered and in a wrong attitude, and yet we find that not one of them are the ones or the source of the idea that we had pilfered off or siphoned off millions of dollars. Not one. Do you know where that came from? It's a funny thing. Came from the lawyer that had been chosen, Mr. Chodos. He is the one who thought of that. And no ex-member of the church and no member of the church ever thought of any such thing. It's ridiculous. I haven't had to go before our church and say I didn't siphon off millions of dollars. I just ignored it because the whole thing is so ridiculous. And the church members have responded 99%. Since this has happened, they have responded, and our income is up and not down. The income is bigger than it was, although we've had to put a few out of the church. But the membership has grown greater because we've taken in more new members than we've had to send out of old members that were wrong.
More of our program right after this announcement.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech.
More and more, Americans are recognizing how actively they must guard the liberties guaranteed them by the Bill of Rights. In January 1979, the state of California brought a landmark lawsuit against the Worldwide Church of God, attempting to replace the church's leadership. The suit claims that the church is a ward of the state. Church funds and assets are called public property. Because of the importance of the First Amendment issues involved, the Worldwide Church of God invites you to examine this packet of information.
Taking the offensive yourself, in a sense, you have accused the state of violating the law. How do you...
The state violated the law in two ways. In the first place, it was a conspiracy hatched on January the 2nd in the private chambers of Judge Pact. And I have read the entire court reporter's report of every word that took place in that conspiracy. And it was a conspiracy without any definite accusation. We had broken no law. We were not charged with breaking any law. But it appointed just without any reason whatsoever, appointed a receiver to take over the church and to fire me and get me out, who had been used by the eternal God in building his church.
It's just unbelievable.
Well, how long do you think I was out? I wasn't out 2 seconds at any time. The church is still running, full blast ahead. Sure, the judge that then took over stopped the letter that I had written from going out of the Pasadena post office, but immediately we sent a letter out through another post office. They didn't know where it was going out, so they weren't able to stop it. And the money started rolling in. And the money comes to me now, right where I'm speaking to you now, from in Tucson, Arizona. We now are the biggest customer of the post office in Tucson by far, because the letters are coming in from 1,500 up to 3,000 or 4,000 a day. So you see, the money is still coming, the work is still going on because the people believe in it. Now another thing, as to siphoning off this money and whether I needed to try to defend myself, I have a stack of signed statements, all on the same sheet of paper that was sent out for them to sign if they wanted to, of just flat sheets of paper, just like any flat sheet, one on top of another, which would reach up to the ceiling of this room and then some, saying and telling how much money they have sent in the last several years, and that they expected that money to go for preaching the gospel around the world and for the kind of trips that I have taken, and that they approve the way the money has been expended. It has been thoroughly reported to them, and they approve it. Now, for some reason, our defense attorneys don't seem to want to use that. Well, they look at, I am learning things, Art. I'm learning things about law that I never knew before. And let me tell you, it is rotten. Like everything else of human endeavor, it is rotten to the core. Our legal system, our court system, there is no justice in it. I've learned a lot of things I did not know before. Now, Stanley Rader is a lawyer, and he is a very brilliant young lawyer. He graduated from law school of the University of Southern California with the highest grades in history. He was always a great exponent for law, and man's law and law and order. But now he says, he sees I have been right all along. The Bible speaks about the unjust judge. We've had a few such experiences ourselves. Do you ever stop to think a judge is a human being just like we are, and that he has the same selfish motives as everybody else? Why is he any different? He's looking out for number one, just the same as everybody else is. That is the way it seems like it is. So there was this conspiracy in Judge Pott's office, and they sent the receiver to fire me and to take over. Now, actually, it was a fishing expedition. They had some trumped-up charges that, as I say, this lawyer Chodos, a lawyer in Beverly Hills, who happened to know these judges and was on a personal acquaintance basis with them, and they hatched up the whole conspiracy. And he is the one who put in the idea that we had siphoned off millions of dollars.
More of our program right after this announcement. The Worldwide Church of God is an international ecclesiastical organization. Each week it conducts church services in nearly 600 cities in the United States, Canada, and around the world. The church operates Ambassador College in Pasadena, California, a 4-year liberal arts institution. The Worldwide Church of God is the sponsoring body of the Ambassador International Cultural Foundation, through which it supports a wide range of scientific, humanitarian, and cultural endeavors. Despite these activities, adverse publicity has recently characterized the Worldwide Church of God as a cult. While the church does not actively solicit members, it is concerned that its international reputation be maintained. This booklet is a clear statement of the church's history and purposes.
You've talked about the government of God earlier in the program. Could you explain what it is and its significance for mankind?
Very few people understand that once the government of God ruled over the whole earth. the government of God. Now, people mostly have never heard of anything like that. They don't know what it is. But it's the government of God. And naturally, every government is based on a basic law or constitution. And the law of God is a law of love. It's summed up by the word love. I always explain it this way in my journeys around the world and proclaiming the gospel and with heads of government and people of that sort, that there are two philosophies or two ways of life. Now, one is the way of get, and the other is the way of give. I like the expression love better than give, but most people don't understand. They are likely to define love in terms of lust. And of course, real love is outgoing concern for the good and welfare of others. It is giving, it is serving, it is helping, cooperating, and so on. The get way is the way of vanity and the way of lust and greed. It is the way of competition against others, of strife, the way of jealousy and envy, and of rebellion, and everything that goes with it. Now, those are the two basic ways of life. The government of God is based on the one word love, and it's love toward God and it's love toward neighbor. But now, when the government of God was first established on this earth, that was way back before man was even created. We find that when God created the earth, as you will read in the 38th chapter of Job, I won't take the time to turn to it and read it, the angels were already there, and when God created the earth, they shouted for joy. Well, that shows that angels were already created. Now, they were the ones who first inhabited this earth, and you find in 2 Peter, the 2nd chapter and the 4th verse, that the angels, some of them sinned and were sinners. The government of God was placed over them on this earth. There was a throne on this earth. I want to read just a little bit of it. I won't take up much time on that. But in Isaiah 14, beginning with verse 12, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer?" It's speaking of that archangel here, the son of the morning. "How art thou cut down to the ground which didst weaken the nations?" Or "How art thou which did weaken the nation cut down to the ground," would be a better translation. "For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars," or the angels of God.
And brethren, I've got a monitor on, so you're going to hear a delay in the background, but I wanted to pause Mr. Armstrong just a moment. He said there was a better translation. I'm searching for the wording he was looking for. I went through several versions, and there's some good things here. I wish I could cut that other one off. Hang on a second. Let's just go through a few verses. We'll go right back to Mr. Armstrong. Let's see. Did I manage to do it? Yeah, I did. Okay. "How have you fallen from heavens, O morning star, son of the dawn? How you have been cut down to the earth, you who conquered nations." And that's kind of put in past tense terms. Let's look at a couple more. We're not going to find the exact wording Mr. Armstrong wanted, but here's some interesting. The MSG version says, "What a come down, this old Babylon day star, son of dawn, flat on your face in the underground mud, you famous for flattening nations." And then what else is said about this? "Old Lucifer, son of the morning, how you're cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations." Now here it is in present tense, and that's the true tense of it here. If I can get this monitor that's in the room to turn down, I want to show you remind us of Revelation 12:19. Oh, here we go. I finally found the button on this little phone to get that down. Okay, Revelation 12 verse 9, we go there, we see that in present times and a future prophecy that the great dragon was cast out, the ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives a few people here and a few people there. Oh no, that's not what this verse says. It says, who deceives the whole world. Present tense and present perfect tense. This continues into the future. He deceives the whole world now, and as long as he's left here on the throne of the earth, he deceives the whole world. And even after he's put into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years, he comes back and deceives the world again one more time. He was cast down to the earth, and his angels were cast down with him. So he who flattens the nations, who deceives them, continues to do so. Let's go back to Mr. Armstrong now.
I will also sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. Now that throne then was under the clouds. It was on earth. He was going to ascend up above the clouds into God's heaven. And he was going to invade heaven and conquer God and take over the whole universe. That was the conspiracy. People will ask the question, did God create a devil? No, God didn't create a devil as such. God created a superior being, an archangel, which was the highest being that even God can directly by fiat create. Now it says here in verse 14, 28th chapter of Ezekiel, thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, speaking to this Lucifer, thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. Now when God created him, he was perfect. And he was perfect for some time until he turned the wrong way. This archangel was a rebel, and he rebelled against the government of God. Angels were placed on this earth. Angels were given the government of God. They rejected it. They turned wrong. As a result, great disaster came to the earth and decay. And as a result, God, in 6 days, as you read in the 104th Psalm, that God renewed the surface of the earth and prepared it for man, and then he created the first man, Adam and Eve.
Well, what about Adam and Eve? Did they have an opportunity to become part of God's government?
Now, Adam had the chance of obeying God, and God saw to it that Satan could not get to him until God had first talked to Adam and Eve and instructed them. If you can remember, if you can realize, God had created a man and a woman. All of a sudden they were created, just that quick. And they were adult. I would guess, although the Bible doesn't say, I would suppose they're probably about age 30 to begin with.
Now, brethren, this is the part where I mentioned to you that Art Gilmore asked Mr. Armstrong, what about Adam and Eve? And he goes on for another minute, and from right here on, pay careful attention if you want to know the answer to this question. And I'm going to come back, pay attention, because I'm going to ask you a question when Mr. Armstrong finishes, and see if you're able to answer the question, will Adam come up on the last great day in the second resurrection? See if you can figure it out from what Mr. Armstrong is saying right here next.
As they were created, they weren't born. They weren't born as little babies. They didn't grow up. They were already grown. They were already mature, but there was no knowledge in their minds. So God began to fill their minds with knowledge, and God talked to them before he let Satan get near them. You know, these are things that most people never think about and don't realize are in the Bible, and they're so very, very important because they're basic, they're fundamental. Then Satan was clever enough to get to Adam by his wife Eve. He didn't come directly to Adam. And as a result, there were the two trees in the Garden of Eden. The one was the tree of life, which was a symbol, and I think there was a real tree there as far as that's concerned, but it was a symbolic tree, and it was a symbol of the Holy Spirit of God. And taking that tree, they would have taken, and God would have given them His Holy Spirit. Now, man was made to need the second Spirit, the Holy Spirit of God. God then, let's turn back to it just a second, the 3rd chapter of Genesis, and at the 22nd verse, and the eternal God said, Behold, the man has become as one of us to know good and evil. He took the knowledge of good and evil to himself. And now, lest he put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, that is, get the Holy Spirit of God, and eat and live forever, and gain eternal life or immortality. Therefore, the eternal God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he, God, drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim, and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. In other words, God shut man off from any association with him at that time. Now, God in effect said, all right, Adam, I have created you. You have had your chance to accept my government, to reject the way of Satan, but you have heard me and you have heard Satan, and you've decided to rebel the same as he did. You have rejected my government. Therefore I say to you, go and form your own governments, your own way. Your mind is not complete and cannot be until you receive my Holy Spirit. And you have rejected that. And I'm driving you out of the Garden of Eden unless you go back and receive that Spirit. Consequently, I will not call you to judgment during this next 6,000 years, but for 6,000 years I am sentencing you and your posterity, which means the whole world, to being cut off from me, your Creator God. Completely cut off. You cannot have any contact or connection with me whatsoever. You will go your own ways and the ways of your own thinking. Now remember, Satan was still there and God didn't shut him off. So Satan has ruled over man and has swayed man, and man's society has built the world we have. God said, build your own governments. You rejected mine. God said, you rejected me as your God, so go form your own religions. So God said, you go form your own fund of knowledge. You've rejected me as the source of knowledge. You've taken to yourself the knowledge of what is good and what is evil. So you won't even have the right knowledge. You've found your own fund of knowledge. Do you know that the most ignorant people in this world are the most highly educated? They are the most ignorant. And the time is coming in the world tomorrow when we're going to have classes of de-education, of unlearning. And those that have gone through and had the highest degrees in the universities are going to have to unlearn the many things that they have been taught there under man's kind of created knowledge. God didn't create it. God was no part of it, but Satan was. Now then, we're in a world where Satan has created the education. Satan has masterminded the governments, and they're all fighting one another. Satan has masterminded the religions. And in the New Testament, there was only one church that was God's. That was founded by Jesus Christ in 31 AD at Jerusalem. And it has existed ever since. Now, of all of the religions in the world, and there are many pagan religions in Oriental countries, and of all of the denominations that call themselves Christian, there's more than 250, do you know that not one except that original church that Christ founded knows who and what God is? I may come back to that a little later. Not one knows what or why man is. What is man? Why was he put here? What was God's purpose in putting him on earth? Not one knows. I'm writing a book on that. Not one knows what was the gospel that Jesus brought. They talk about preaching the gospel. Well, I'll have more to say about that, I hope, a little later. Maybe not on this program, at a later program. And not one knows what about the hereafter and what is it all about and what's going to happen. Not one knows the real destiny of man. Well, pretty soon you begin to wonder and ask, well, what does man know? Does he know anything?
All right, the video hung up right there toward the end, but, brethren, the audio continued, and Mr. Armstrong ended that with a good question. What does man know about God's truth? Well, without God's Spirit being mankind being driven out of the Garden of Eden, he had to go his own way, as Mr. Armstrong said, and form his own governments, form his own educational system, form his own criminal justice system, which, as Mr. Armstrong said, by this point in time down the road in the history of man, 6,000 years since Adam now, we nearly are, as you heard, as he cried about the indignities and the evilness of this justice system, under mankind. With God's intervention, you can get some help in the courts, but by and large, like he's pointing out, it's an evil system of men, with men writing the lesson God wants men to understand, that without God, man just really cannot govern himself. But now, if you listened carefully, I want to ask you this question, and you don't have to do it now while we're live. You can still add comments to both Facebook Live and to YouTube Live on the Sabbath Service page on Facebook and on the Sabbath Service channel on YouTube. You can add a comment to answer this question. Will Adam, and do we know from what Mr. Armstrong said tonight, or you can go back, to any time Mr. Armstrong has spoken. Will Adam come up in the great white throne judgment, in the second resurrection? In other words, will Adam come up on the last great day? All right? Now I want you to base it on the truth God gives us through his end-time apostles speaking, and backed up by God's Word. So that's just a little quiz for fun. All right, no big deal. And, quote things so we can take a look at it, and I'll talk about that again another time after some of you, if you want to do that. You don't have to, but if you want to, I think it's a question most people are interested in, and within the videos we've played within the past 14 days, Mr. Armstrong has more fully answered it. Well, I told you earlier that in the sermon he gave that we played from 1978, 1979, Last Great Day, that we played here on cogtv.org on the Last Great Day this year, 2020, Mr. Armstrong gave the answer as to whether Adam will come up in the great white throne judgment or not. And it was quite revealing. And I'm going to run that question by the fellows that have worked for over 20 years in letter answering, and I want to ask them, did that question ever come up across your desk? And if so, was there then, when you worked there, a standard answer, that would be provable from the Bible, that had been handed down from God's apostle that y'all sent out? Did anybody ever ask you that question? I'm curious. And I'll share that with you after I get a response back from one or other of the guys that worked in letter answering for over 20 years. Tom Williams and Hernan Herrera. And maybe there's other fellows of you that work there that you could say, hey, Steve, I worked there, and yeah, we did have an answer, or no, I don't remember an answer. I don't remember us ever getting that question before. I'd be surprised if you had not got that answer before. I mean, if you had not got that question before. All right, listen, it's late. I'm obviously showing it. We all need to get some rest and sleep tonight. And those of you who are watching from the United Kingdom, as some of you have told me you do in the morning, you use it as your morning service. Well, happy Sabbath to you. For the rest of us who are either watching live or later tonight from the United States, or near a time when I'm doing this program, I wish you a good night's rest, and God willing, and a Creek Don't Rise will plan to be back here. Thanks for those of you who are with us tonight. May God bless you and bless your sleep tonight. May it be precious and wonderful. And God willing, I'll plan to be back here with you 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 Central, 7:30, God forbid, on the West Coast. You can watch it later from the archive. And that's 2:30 or 3:30 in the afternoon in the United Kingdom, BST, British Standard Time. Until then, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath. Happy Sabbath, everybody, and those in the U.S., good night.